Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Today is day 13 of DDCDP23 in PHP and part 3 of building MVC framework in PHP. In this session, we will build fully functional dependency injection containers or services container. Through this, we will be able to dynamically pass arguments to constructors of various controllers. There is a lot to cover, so let's dive in. So, welcome to the next part of the MVC framework in PHP. We have been so far able to build the views system. So we have the views folder, and any of these files are used for outputting any of the output from our site. So lastly, what we used was this controller student name, and for this we are using the student name view file, which is this one, and here it is outputting this id, and this id is coming from the route in the center of the URL student name. This is the controller, this is the variable which is Shaheen, and then this is, so if you use Shaheen, it is outputting Shaheen. If you use Haris, so it will output Haris. So all of this is dynamic now. But if we view source, so you can see it is just the HTML h1 tag. It is not showing any of the basic HTML markup. So what can we do with it? Any ideas? If we go to the view file, this is the name.php. so here you can see it is just the h1 tag which is getting outputted. So we need to have some mechanism so that all the basic HTML in the page is also output. So for example, for this we will create, these are a folder inside the views. We'll call it partials. Okay, this is a folder. So maybe now new file, we will call it header.php. Here we will use the normal HTML markup above the body, this one, and we will remove this for now and save. So this is going to be header.php. So if we go to the controller, again the student name controller, here we are including just the student name. So above this we will use print $, this viewer, the same render method, and what should it render? Partials slash header. That's it. And if we need to have some variables, we will pass those here, but we can have one variable which is the title, and it should be student, for example, name or whatever. If we don't pass it, so we have a default one which is the document, that will be output. If we come back to header.php, so we will make this one a PHP tag so that variable can be output here. And what should be the variable name? Title. $, title, print. That's it. So now the title will be dynamic. Otherwise, in all the pages title then would be document. So now if we pass the title variable to the header, which we are doing now from here, so title should be student name. So now that will be available there. So let's refresh the page, and if we view source, so you can see the top of the document now is there. Okay, undefined variable title, it's not getting passed there. Title is student name. Okay, in the viewer file we are not. Here we need to have this variable inside the data attribute, not as So if we go to this, what was the error? Web title in undefined variable title. Data. So the title will be extracted to $sign title and it should be passed to user. User functions. What are we missing? Anybody? Partials header and the title is the big title. Let me comment out this one for now just to see. Okay, you are not telling me that we are not using the arrow.
Yes, sir.
Sorry for the pause. Hopefully it will be now fixed. And you can even see it from this student name in the tab.
Yes.
Page source. So our title now is student name. So whatever you pass it, it will be available here. What else are we missing? We are now missing the, if you go to the source, we are missing the closing body tag and HTML.
Yes, sir.
So what we can do? We can create another partial. Here it will be new file footer.php, and here we will just paste the body and HTML. You can have any other stuff as well, maybe if you want, but for now footer.php is this closing body tag and HTML. So in the student name.php, what else we can do? We will just copy this headers footer, and it is going to be nothing or maybe empty array like this. So if you refresh, you can see these two things have been added. Is this clear? So you can have even the sidebars like this, even some logic. For example, if there is a router, there is a controller, so you can add extra sidebars, maybe extra headers. All of those can be done. We will study Twig in this app as well, so all of those will be covered for us. So then, but this is the basics of views, and I hope this is clear. The next thing is, let us recap a bit. If we go to dispatcher, and here we are using the reflection method. What were we using reflection method for? To get parameters automatically into the actions of a controller. So similarly, we need some logic here as well for something which is called auto wiring or passing parameters to the constructors of classes automatically. Just like we are passing parameters to the actions automatically,
Yes.
we need parameters for constructors also. So let us do some stuff before that. If we come to maybe news controller, if you remember, The news controller basically is right now it is being passed viewer as object as a dependency, and it is used as this is dependency injection for this viewer class, and we are saving it into this variable here. Okay, and if you see in the deal function, let me just first access this route so that you can recall. So it's what's the name of the route? News controller.
News controller. News dash.
By the way, I have learned over this course how to zoom URLs, so that I will do for you here. So it's news dash controller, and the action is deal. And now it basically it outputs the two records in the news database table. So news controller slash deal, this is what it does. When this controller path is accessed, it outputs these two records from the database, because right now we only have two records. So how is it doing it? The deal has news model here. If you remember what is model is one of the parts of MVC. So here we have the news model. It connects to the database and select all from records, then return the records. And in the news controller, here we are using the view render system, and news view is being rendered with news new. And here if you go to the view news view, this one here, it is being output. That's it, nothing extravagant, right? So now we need to change something called, this is not a good approach to use news new inside a method in a controller. So we should have this as a dependency also. The news model should be a dependency as well. So what first steps we should do? We can pass the news model here. So it will be news model and news model, maybe something like this. Okay, so this will be passed to, rather than initializing it here, it will be passed to the constructor of this news controller object class. Okay, so the next step is we will make it available here, news model, and the variable is $sign news model, like this. Now it should be this dot news model equals whatever is passed to it. Okay, this one, news model. So this is the same thing.
That is new model, news model.
We are missing the arrow.
Small. Yes.
Is this clear?
Yes.
So now the constructor of a news model class will need extra parameter, which is the model class of the news. Okay, don't confuse controllers with models. Now controller is just the controller, and news model will be passed to it. So here now what change should we bring? Anybody?
So we have to use the
We will-
news model.
Exactly, we will remove this line, and this will become the news model object,
Yes, sir.
and this will be this, and we will remove the,
Yes.
so nothing extra, just we will now be using this. And one advantage of this is, if we have more than one methods in this class, for example, for some reasons, so we can use this dot news model everywhere.
Yes, sir.
In the previous implementation, we would have to use new all the time, which is not the it's not efficient.
Initial.
Okay, so now we have used two parameter, and we can have more than one classes going inside a constructor as well. It all depends upon the logic right now.
We are
Okay,
passing the objects through the constructor.
through the constructor now. Okay, so this is the change we needed to make, and which is all good. But now if we go to dispatcher, and remember, we are going to make a reusable system, dynamic system, not just for the news controller class. Okay, so if you go to the dispatcher, where is dispatcher? This, and we come down to the code where we are initializing the controller. This is the controller. So new class viewer. Here, even here we are not doing it right. We are maybe a controller doesn't need viewer at all, but still we are passing it because we know we need it. Now what should be the next parameter here for the controller? Model. So one way is that we will create a model here.
Yes, initialize the model and then pass it.
Model equals new news model. This one. That's it. So then we will pass it as a second parameter to the model object. Like this, and we will use the news model here at the top, which this editor already has included for us. So this is what we are doing now, but this is not the optimal way. Why? Anybody?
Because it is just only for the viewer.
Exactly, this is only for the viewer and news model. We are using this code. We should be using this code for all the classes, controller classes in our application. Okay, and our application can have hundreds of different classes, and all of them can have different parameters getting passed to it. So maybe if there is some other class, for that we will need another class, some other class. So all of those will be initialized here, which is wrong, and it is even not, feasible at all. So what we will do, we won't do this thing. We will remove this code, even the viewer code.
Right now it is hard coded, and we are
It
going
is
to make
hard-coded.
it dynamic.
Exactly. So now the goal is to make these two values dynamic for us. Okay. So how can we do it? Because this code is getting bigger, we should have moved all of the sub pieces into methods, but for now let us create another method here, and we will call it what can we say? Public function give me object, or in other words, it should be passed a class. So for example, if a database class is passed to it, it will return the database new of the database class, like this, and so on. Public function. Are we doing it at the right place, or here it should be? Okay. So what should it return? It should return some object, like this object. Okay. So for example, if a class is passed, the class is say model, maybe model. So what we will return new model. That's it. If the class is whatever, so we will call it new class, like this. Okay. So it will return the object for us, object of that class. So give me object is the method. Now how can we use it here? For example, if I need it here with the controller, this one,
and give me object.
Yes. So what we will do controller is equals new class, not new class, but give me object $ class, and this will be this give me object. That's it. Is this clear? So now if a controller is passed to it, it will return us the controller, and then the controller action is called here. But this controller should be called with its own constructor methods, arguments, whatever. That is what we are now going to find. So how can we find this? First thing first, before this new class here, let me create, we'll call it class equals, or not class, but yes, class. So or maybe details equals new reflection class. So it is passed the name of the class. So the class we already are passing to this function. class like this, and we can use reflection class. So
Yes, sir.
at the top of the page, reflection class. Okay, now the detail will have what the reflection class details, and we will dump it. We will do it by dumping these in detail and exit, and the shortcut is use DD. So if I, where has that disappeared to? Try this. So what is being passed to it? The news controller class. This is the news controller here, right? The URL has news desk controller.
Yes, sir.
So this code passes that controller name. This, let me comment it out. So this is the name of the controller which is passed to it. So it is being used in reflection class. Is passed as reflection here, and then the detail is being output. So the name is app controllers is okay. It has a method. These are the methods of this news controller, right?
Yes, sir.
But right now we will use detail has get constructor. Okay, this is the method. Now if we dump it, we will get details of the constructor. So the parameters are, what are these?
News model.
Viewer and news model.
Yes, sir.
Can you see?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if we go to the news controller class, so it has viewer and news model.
News model, yes.
For some reasons, for example, if we still don't believe that it is taking this information from here, so we will maybe add another class and we will make it maybe this one, student name, for example. Okay, so student name and then std student name, that's the third parameter. So now what would you be seeing if I refresh the page?
Student name.
It will have student name also. Okay, so automatically we are getting. Now we will remove this. It now knows that this class has two parameters for its constructor, which we need actually, right? Where were we? Okay. And now if I use another function, because it returns what? The get parameters. Get parameter. This is a method also. So what are you now expecting? It will be an array. This is an array of reflection parameter. This is also a class, reflection parameter. So it has now two values. The one is viewer and another one is news model. Okay. So I will loop through it. Maybe parameters array. I will call it parameters array. Okay. The variable is this. Now for each parameter array as param, for example, right? And param, actually I will dump it. Param is by itself an object, now a class, and it will be, if I use get type and dump it. First to controller construct 0 pass in this. Okay, we have removed the exit, that's why it is causing this error. Let us reuse that. Okay, the the type is reflection name type, and the name is framework. So previously that was an array, now it is an array of reflection name types. If I use string with it, just like this, an object can be stringified. Stringified means there is a magic method underscore to string. You can Google about that. So if we change it into a string, the type, so let us check how it behaves now. So now it gives us the full path to the
Yes, sir.
to the classes with the namespace. So framework viewer is the first argument, and the second one is app models news model. Is this okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now if I create outside of this for each, if I create parameters to constructor, you can name it anything, equals an empty array, and here rather than dumping it, we will assign those parameters to this array. So how can we do that? We will remove the dump for now and use this param construct. We will fill this array now. Equals this. Okay. If I don't use this, what will be the problem then?
Yes, sir. It will be assigned, that string will be assigned to that variable.
Exactly. It won't be an array.
Yes, sir.
And if I dump parameters constructor now, this variable outside of the for each,
Yes, sir.
so what are you expecting? Just the names.
It will have both the names of.
This is an array now with both the names.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
So return new class. Here what should we do? Return new class, and then it should have these two parameters. So we already have learned it that we can use 3 dots
Yes.
with the name of the parameters array to construct this one. We already have created this one, and we will remove this one. So it will now return what? New class and the parameters passed to it
Yes, sir. Both the.
as its constructor arguments.
Yes, sir.
So do you think it will be working now? Okay. It says argument 1 must be of type framework viewer, string given. Similarly, the second one should be, so both of them are just strings right now. These are strings actually, but we are not going to pass the strings here. Okay, what should we do? We will create a variable here first. We can call it subclass equals this. So this is now the name of the class, not the class itself, it's just the name of the class. But here we will new it, we will create this instance. So what can it be? New $sign subclass, that's it. Previously we were adding the names of the classes to it. Now we are initializing those classes. So new framework viewer and new framework model, they are being initialized and then added to the array. Now if I, previously the array was like this, just the names. If I refresh it, you can see now it is converted into objects, not the strings itself, and the page is working fine now. It is now what? Dynamic. So let me repeat how we have done it. Here we have created this method give object and it's passed the same controller name, whatever it is. Okay.
Yes, sir.
But we don't know what the arguments to the constructor will be. So for that we have created this give me object pass the class. Here we have used the reflection class, passing the class which is passed to this method. It gives us the detail, and detail has a get constructor method, and then it has a get parameters method, and it returns us the parameter array. And parameters this is our self array where we will be storing the initialized versions of these
Yes, sir.
classes. So for each this has both the arguments. We are using the get type and then converting it into string to get the name of the subclass, and then we are initializing it here and saving the objects inside this array which we have created here. The next is we are dumping it. So if you dump it, we are seeing both the objects of the class in the array, and then we are returning new class. Which class? Which is passed to this method. So if it is a controller, it will be, and it surely is a controller, so it will be pass its arguments, which are the objects. Remember, I intentionally used the string initially, so it gave us an error. So we need to initialize those classes which are being passed as strings, and then we get that controller here with all the parameters automatically, constructor parameters automatically, and then the rest of the things are the same.
Yes, sir.
So hopefully this will be clear at this stage, but still there are a few caveats, and they are, for example, okay, so far the application is good enough to be carried on. The next step is if we come to the model class. Where is model? This one, news model. So you can see it has the database connectivity inside this file, which is not good. Where should we have the database? We are using news model class, database connectivity inside the news model class. We should have a separate database class. We should have a separate database class, and wherever we need the database class, we will be injecting that into the in the model.
Yes.
So for that we will first create in the framework, not framework, but maybe inside the source directly. Here we will create a new file and call it database.php, right? It should be php class database, and it should have a namespace of, if it is directly inside the source, so it should be app.
Yeah.
The next thing is it should have a get connection method. So public function get connection or something like this. And we will move all the code from the model, use model, this one, to get connection. Sorry, this one, just this. And get connection should be returning PDO. Okay, so here we can use return PDO like this. Okay, PDO is being highlighted by the so we can use if we have not used PDO, what should we do with it? Backslash. Good. Use PDO like this. All the curly lines have gone. Okay, so nothing else has changed. We are using the database. We have moved all the connection details to the get connection method of the database class. And now the next step is, what is the next step? We'll go to the model and we will use it here. In the model we should have public function __ construct, and here we will be passing the database as a dependency. db. We can call it db, sorry, db and then why is this line? We have to use the proper use statement also. So use app slash database, that's it. Okay, we will create a private. What is automatic property? For example, one way is we can define the data a variable, and we will call it private database and db like this. Now when this is being passed, what should we do? This
Assign this
db equals
that is equal to
$db. Whatever is being passed to it, it will be assigned to it. So this is known as property assignment
Yes,
on
sir.
whatever. But automatic property assignment is promotion, it is also called. We can skip this step and this step also. In the constructor you can just use private or public
Yes,
or
sir.
whatever. So private database db, this exactly means that. So it means we have a property, its name is db, and this dot property, so it is equivalent to whatever code we previously
Yes, sir.
had. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now we can use this dot db here rather than pdo. So what pdo will be? We will remove this code also. This dot db is the name of the and it has a method get connection, that's it, because it returns the pdo object, so it's one liner now. So wherever you have to use the database connectivity, now you can include or pass that to the constructor of that particular class,
Yes.
and you can then use this .db with the get connection method. It will return the. So do you think if I refresh the page all will be okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if I refresh the page, there is an error, and the error is what does the too few arguments means? That a function needs more than the number of arguments which you have passed to it currently. Exactly. So if you read it properly, too few arguments to function app models news model constructor. What does this mean?
So we are only passing one parameter, I think, right now.
We
Or
are
one
not
argument.
passing any parameter at all to the news model function, news model class, sorry. So if you come to news model, it is now being passed, the constructor is passed the database object.
Yes, sir.
Previously that was not being passed. So our code which we have written in dispatcher.php, if we come to this part, as you can see, this new subclass. So the news model is being initialized without the database connectivity. So here, if maybe it's in loop, but just for your understanding, if we new database here, then the error will be gone, because this subclass is expecting now the database connection class, need the object of the database class. So what can you guess from this? We have sorted out the problem we had for the controller. This is the controller. Now all the arguments of the controller are automatically passed via this method. We are doing it here. Okay, this automatic. But if one of the classes which are being passed as the parameters to the constructor itself needs another class in its constructor,
Yes, sir.
so this becomes a chain. This is known as object graph or object model or whatever you can say. So the constructor needs two classes, viewer and database model, but the model itself then needs the database class now, and maybe database class also needs something else, and so on. So it's a chain.
Yes, sir.
So that's why it needs recursion.
Recursion, yes, sir.
Okay, so we can recall this method.
Yes, sir.
So here, rather than new subclass, we will
Call the new object.
we will call this give me object method again, and its plus the class name. So what we can do is new sorry, not new, but we will recall this method. So this dot give me object, we are calling this method again, and this is very tricky. The recursion code is always tricky, so you should practice it what is happening, because if I go into details of what this method now is doing, so it will waste a lot of our time. Our focus is on the framework we are building rather than recursion. So you can Google about recursion yourself, but what this will do is we will pass this subclass to it, a subclass. So this will ensure that, for example, if this is now the model class, so it will check if this requires, its constructor now requires another class, it will check it and initialize that as well, and then call the model class. So this will go to the level maybe 3, 4, 5 levels down. It will fetch all the dependencies, initialize it, and then return it, and so on. Will go at that on the higher levels, and now hopefully the error is gone. If you refresh the page on null in, so we still have a problem. Maybe give me object.
So in recursion, it have a problem of infinite loop if we don't have any
Yeah,
boundaries.
there are two. We should skip the call to member function get parameters on. Okay, and this is again a very good error for us to know, because viewer class, if you think, now it is doing it for everything. The viewer class, if you go to the viewer class, do you think there is any where is viewer? Okay, the viewer class has no constructor. Do you see?
Yes.
It's no constructor. So if I just add public function underscore underscore construct like this, construct, and it is also passed for some reasons database db, and we will make it private as well. So this is shortcut for property promotion, and we will use the use database function, use a app, and then database. Okay, so now the viewer class also has a constructor. Okay, so if it has a constructor, now do you think the error will be gone? This error was only because of this, that the viewer class with the code we have, the recursive code we have started to write, it thinks that it should also have a constructor, and it didn't have a constructor. Now it has a constructor. So if we refresh the page, at least there is some change in the error. Now the database class also is being checked, and so on. So it can go down. What we can do is we will now remove the where is it? We will remove the constructor because it doesn't need any database in its constructor. But in the dispatcher method, this give me object if we will use if the detail is new reflection method, and then the detail of get constructor. Okay, so here we can use if $detail and get constructor equal to null. Get constructor will be null for those classes which don't have constructors. So
Small parenthesis.
like this. Okay, so for which in our app right now, for which classes the get constructor will be null? Viewer.
Yes.
So what should we do in that case? If the constructor for a class is null,
Yes, sir.
what should we do? Should we check its parameters and all that, and then return the new parameters, or we should do something else?
We should do something else.
So what should that be?
Just to weave the element what we have in the model.
So if the method name is give me object, so you can just check it, guess it from this give me object. So if the class is whatever it is, which we will just return the new class like we were previously doing. That's it.
Yes, sir.
So if viewer has no constructors, it will just return the viewer object. That's it. We don't need to pass any arguments to the constructor, right? But if it has, so then it will go through all of this. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So if you refresh the page now, hopefully in stack, where it is, line 34. Controller is equal to go to constructor. Okay, we are not returning it. And remember one thing, and I already have said this, and you will have now solidified this concept also. If a return is used even at the top of a function,
Yes, sir.
and it is run,
Return something,
so
yes,
all
sir.
of this won't be run again
Yes, yes, exactly.
afterwards.
The remaining code,
Yes,
yes, sir.
and this is normally known as unreachable code.
Yes.
Unreachable code is something which is after the return statement.
Return statement.
It considered the last line of the code.
Yeah, so if this becomes true, this return will be in effect and the rest of the code won't be run. So if we refresh the page now, and we are back to normalcy. Now automatically the viewer object has been initialized for us using this code, and it has been returned. The first iteration of this will do this, and the second one will use this method of recursion, and it will come down to the database class even. And if you can check, the news model is this. If I just for once dump maybe what, this one, inside the loop, okay?
Yeah, I'll redumping it, sir.
Yes, we'll stepwise do it. Okay, so you can see one of the dumping is providing us the database, which is coming from the inside of the recursive function, and then the outermost. So this is the inner, because the model itself needs database,
Yes, sir.
and then the constructor needs these two. And if it is up to 3 or 4 or 5 levels, so you can see all of those as well. You can practice what it is this function is doing. Okay, now I'll remove the dumps, so it is working fine at the moment, and that's all. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now let's build on this further. What improvement according to you we can bring inside this? What improvements we can bring inside this function
So
in this class?
I remove the new PD.
No, that's fine, but we are saving the credentials hard coded inside the. If there are more than one database in an application, and if we for example need a connection, and in the connection we will then need extra parameters, so that this is dynamic also, the DB, the name of the DB is dynamic, or maybe the host is dynamic.
Yes.
So these credentials should not be inside the get connection method. It should be passed as a constructor to the database. So
Yes, sir.
what we can do is public function construct construct, and then it will be passed 4 separate parameters. What should be, those be? String, or maybe private string, DB name. Okay,
Yes, sir.
so $db, the first one should be $db, The second one will be private string, and it should be, sorry, the first one should be host. Then this one should be DB. The third one should be database name, no, username. This is username, and this is password. So private string username and private string password. So now we have done this to the constructor.
And so the character set and port number should be same.
Yeah, they are mostly the same. We can make them dynamic as well, but it's fine for now, for just the understanding of this concept. So what change we do, we need to have now in this DSN, this host, this is dynamic now. So it should become
This
good. Should become $, this host. And let me quickly copy this so that we can save some time. This one should become
DB, this
DB, and this one should become username, and this one should become password. Or maybe we don't need brackets here. Is this clear now?
Yes.
So we have sort of made it dynamic. So what should happen with the classes now, the constructor now? If we are calling the database class, we should be passing these 4 values while we are calling the.
with the class.
Okay. So the code we have written, if you can see now, if we go to the database class, the dispatcher, and here we are returning the new class, and all of this is assuming that the parameters passed to the classes are actually subclasses. They are not assuming them to be strings. And in the database class, if you can see, for example, the news controller, where is news controller? News, okay. So news controller has 2 parameters, viewer and news model. So what are they? They are actually objects,
Yes, sir.
right? Similarly, the model also needs one constructor argument, which is the database object. So here again it is object, but now in the database itself, if you go to the database class, this is the database class. Here these are not
Objects.
these are not objects, these are just strings.
Yes, sir, these are
So
just
now
strings.
there will be another error if you refresh the page, that it will be assuming as if these are the classes, and it will initialize those, try to initialize those, and there will be some havoc in the application. So if we refresh the page now, there is this error. Class string does not exist in this dispatcher 56 reflection class. It assumes as if this is some class.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So again, this is you can you can call it a nightmare. Huh?
Due to the reflection.
Yes, because we have used and assumed that all the arguments to the constructors will be objects, but now it is string. Okay. So again, we will go to the dispatcher. Where is dispatcher? Okay. In the dispatcher,
Get constructor is equal to string. Some.
let us dump this detail. So if I dump detail, $detail, and then get reflection class. Not here, but rather we should so you can see the type hint is, and here it is throwing the error.
Yes, sir.
So so this dump is coming from this variable. If you go to dispatcher, here we are dumping it, and it shows that these are normal objects variable for constructors, viewer, news model, db, but now you can see the host variable which we are passing to the database class, as it is recursively working now. So in the database.php, here you can see we are passing the strings as parameters to the construct method. So that's why it thinks that there should be a class of string. So what we should do is we should re-implement some part of this code and introduce a concept called containers. So in all frameworks, modern frameworks, Drupal, Laravel and Symfony, there is the concept of containers, and containers is used for something like this. For example, the automatic initialization of variables passed to the arguments passed to the constructor should be done by all this code in the dispatcher we have right now. This code, this give me object, but if some parameters are not actual objects or classes but strings or some other basic for example int or something like that, then we should be using something called containers. And what containers are, let us start working on it, so you will understand what containers are. Containers basically are used to fetch objects of something, some basic data types like strings, if they are used as constructor arguments. So here in the framework we will create a file and we will call it container.php, and let us create the class. We should have a namespace also. So what should be the namespace? It's inside the framework, so it should be framework, right? Normally container, there are standards of naming the container methods, but for now let us just, for your understanding, we will use two methods in it. One is we'll call it one is get public method, get, and it will get the class name will be passed to it, okay, or class. And one is set public function set, and set will do something as well, and another one will be value. For now let us just, we will be making it untyped, and we will have a private, or maybe this private and array, and we will call it bindings, or you can call it anything, bindings. This is going to be an empty array. initialize it as empty array. We will initialize it as a, so binding or bindings we can call it, or you can even call it registry. So what this does is, I will just explain it in pseudocode first and then we will write code. So we will be using the get method of this constructor to get the object of a class. Okay, so if this bindings has that object, so for example it will be something like objects bindings, and if it is a data, it is the database class, bindings database class, whatever it is. So its value is, it will be the object of database class, so it's db. Okay, so we will check if this this binding has the database class. If it is, it will return the object, otherwise it will do. So for example, for string based arguments and all such basic parameters, we will be using the bindings array to store its initialization. If it is not available, then we will be using the dispatcher code, this dispatcher code, all this dispatcher code. Okay, so let us move all this code to the container method. All this code should go to the container method. So let us first use some if statement. If I go to container here, I will remove this code, this was just for your purposes. So if, how can I check if the class name passed is available, its key is available here? So we will use if array underscore key underscore exists, and the class name variable, the class, if this exists, then something do return what? We will return bindings and that class.
Remove one is.
Okay. And how to do this? This is this dot, like this. Okay.
So it has to be checked inside the array. Array underscore key will check the class inside the array.
Yeah. So the first array is this dot.
No, the first one will be class and the second one will be the binding array.
Okay.
It will check inside the binding array.
The first is bindings probably.
No sir, the second one is the binding.
Okay, that's fine. So it will check the class. If it is there in the bindings, it will return the bindings. Okay. And what will the set method do? It will this dot bindings and class $class equals $value. Okay. So what this will do is class, this is, so this is class. Okay. So set class, if we pass the name of the class, for example database class, so it will save the name of the database class as a key in this bindings array, and this value will be object. Similarly here we will be checking if the key exists. For example, if the database class key exists in this bindings, we will return it. Okay, let me just confirm array underscore key exists. So the first value is yes, and the second is array. Good. Okay. If this is not the case, so if an entry exists for a particular class which is passed to the get method, it will check it in the bindings array. If it finds one, so the object corresponding to that entry will be returned. That's what the concept of containers is. Okay, the next is we should copy all the code from dispatcher's method give me object method, all of this. We'll copy it from here and move it to the containers get method here. So first let us change the now the method name is get. So it should not be give me object, it should be get. The same recursion applies here as well, the same code actually. And we are using the reflection class, so you will use reflection. Okay, simple. If the get method of the container is used, it will check the array, the bindings array. If a value is found, it will return that. Otherwise, it will go through all that code which we already have understood. So it will create the reflection class, and even I can type some for primitive data type parameters to constructors. And this is for the objects, right? So if the parameters are primitive data types like string and int, so this code will run. Otherwise it will dive into this code and then the same logic. So this code is for something like viewer, which has no constructor, which is a class, but it has no constructor, so it will also return the class name and then the same logic. If we are inside the function parameters array here, so we are creating the new instance of that particular object here. So this code already I have explained. Now let us go to the how to use this container class. So we will inject it into the dispatcher here. And by the way, we already have few copied code from the give me object method to the container get method, so we will remove this code. And here we were using this dot give me object class. So what should we do now? We first will have to use container, and container is inside the framework. So do we need to use it? If there is a class which you want to use but it's in the same directory, or then you don't need to use the use statement for that particular class, right? Okay, so we will inject it here in the constructor and the container $container, right? So it will be this dot container equals $container, and the container should be a private property here which we can use, container $container, like this. Is this clear? Now instead of this give me object, we should use this dot container dot get, because we already have the get method. That's it. So the class now will be passed to this get method. We have covered all of it. Now if we go to the index page here, so there is a line beneath the dispatcher. Why is it so? Anybody? Because the dispatcher now accepts two parameters, router and container. Previously it was router, but now container, so it is now expecting
container.
So it will be saying too few parameters. So here we need to pass the container. So container should be passed here, but we need to initialize container. So how should we do it? Container equals new container. and the container actually is
The class.
it already has included framework container. Okay, do we need anything in the container? Are there any no, we don't. We have no constructor for it at the moment, so we don't need any constructor variables for it. So container is equal to new container. Then what were we expecting for the database class here? The database class is passed these parameters: host, db, username and password. And the class which is which class needs your test? Which class needs the database class right now? The news model. If you remember, we had passed the database as its constructor parameter, and we assigned it to the database variable, and we are using that here. So we already, this news model class will be used in this code, and we don't have the database class right now, right? So what should we do? We should create a database class also. db equals new database, and when new database, it means we need to have a use for the use as well. So use, do we already have database or no? Yes, we already have app database. Okay, so the database needs what? 4 values for constructor. What they are? Host is db, db
Database name DB.
and
Username.
db,
DB password.
db. We are using ddef, so all of the values are approximately the same db, right? So now the object has been created for the database class. What's next to do? Now you will understand why we have created container. So container we already have initialized. What should we do is,
To pass the value to the set method.
exactly, so we already have container, so container dash set, and what set will do? It will have the key and value.
Yes sir, key
Okay.
value, yes sir.
Okay, so if I say db, this is the object which we have created here.
Yes, sir.
Double colon class. What does this mean? It's the string name of the class. This double colon class is a keyword. You can call it keyword. So if it is called against an object, it will use the name of the class, fully qualified name of the class. Okay, and then the second parameter will be the value. So what should be the value?
Value should be an object.
Yeah, so what's the object here?
db.
db. That's
$sign
good.
db.
That's good. So now what should be the, let me just dump this so that you can understand what this is doing. Okay, so dump db double colon class, and maybe if we dd it, let's try if there is no error. So this is the fully qualified name of the string name of the data class. Okay, colon colon class means the full name. We can even write it like this, there is no issue in it. App slash database. Okay, but if you don't know the fully qualified name of the class, so what you can do, from the object you can just use db, for example, whatever is the object of the class, and then class, right? So it will, so the what this code will do is, it will create a key in the array with this name
Yes sir.
and this value. Is this clear?
Yes sir.
And then we will just pass the container to the router. So internally, once it's the turn for database class here to for its initialization, this database class in the container, if we go to the container code here, we already have used this code. Okay, so if the get is called internally, it will call the get now because it is being called from dispatcher here.
Yes sir.
In the dispatcher, if you remember,
Yes sir. We have
this
called-
dot get this. So when it is the turn for database class, this one is the database class, for example database class. So it will enter here, it will check if the array key exists. So this is database class key, whatever, and this is the binding. So if it exists, what it will do, it will directly return the database object, and that's it. The function will stop. So it will not go through this code. So if it doesn't go through this code, so that code will not be run, and the class will actually be initiated without the with the primitive data types. It will not throw any error here. Is this clear?
Yes.
Okay, let me refresh the page now. Remove the DD. So everything is working fine now. It won't throw any error. Okay, but you might have seen we are still not used to using typed arguments. What are typed arguments? You already have seen it.
You're passing values along with the type that is. It will be that type. The variable or the parameter will be that type.
Exactly, like this here.
Yes, sir.
If you go to
String type.
the database class here,
Yes, sir.
you can see.
Type
Word
index.
string, yes, sir.
Yeah, so if somebody doesn't pass these, I mean this is good enough way of coding these days to pass arguments with the proper type. But if somebody doesn't use it, it's not important unless you have used declare strict types 1. Okay, so for example, if somebody omits the string from the first one, and if you refresh the page, or maybe not here, or if we can check it from the viewer class, this is string file name, right? Let me give you an example. Let us comment out this code for now. Maybe this if I go to content.php and the get method here, this is the code actually, the subclass. So if I dump the param here, param dump $sign param, or maybe this code for now, where it is, this one, so that the database class is again dealt by this code. Actually I want to show you some errors which we can control here in the for each code. Okay, so if I dump it, so the host is, now again we are going towards the database class without dealing, because I have commented that line. So what it says, the class string does not exist in this. If I go to database class, where is the database class? Okay, so if I remove the string, now this, and refresh the page, so now even the class name doesn't show because string is has been removed.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let us this is, you can see the parameter is reflection parameter. This is a type of class. So if you go to the dispatcher code here, and if I change it to get type, this is a method on this parameter, and if we refresh it, you can see it is giving the null type. So what does this mean? That for if you omit some string or int primitive data type names from the parameters, the return value will be null. Okay, so what we can do is, if param get type is equal to null. So what should we do? We haven't yet studied exception handling for this project, but we can throw some exception here, right? But here right now we will say exit. You must add type with the class constructor arguments, right? And what's the type? The name we can use, get probably the name also. So with the constructor param get name like this. Okay, let's check if it is throwing an error now. Okay, you must add type with the constructor host. Okay, if I remove if I add the name here, string host, now that error will be gone, but now it will be throwing that database class error. But at least you can control the type here, right? Now let us check the dump again. What is this? Is built in false. And if we use this argument, what does this show? Is built in true. As I said earlier as well in the class, that the objects have some values which you can always use for if statements or decision making.
Yes.
So if you can see, framework viewer app models use model is built in. This is not built in. The built-in is false for these reflection name type, but for string host it is built-in is true. So you can even use if statement for is built-in also. So if it is true, so you can do something else, for example, right? So all of these decisions you can make. Is this clear? Now we will reuse or re-implement, we will uncomment actually the container code, which is this one, return. So now hopefully everything will be in place again, and we are seeing the cricket match between Pakistan and India. This is just the dump we are getting from for each. Is this clear? The next step we need to do is, so more or less the container is now ready for us. The container functionality basically is ready for us. Okay, we can improve the framework. Right now it is the framework is the folder, the source where we are writing our code. Then the views you already know are used for outputting. And what is the vendor? This has come from the composer JSON. So whatever we are installing, it will go to, for example, we have installed the Symfony dump, var dump, so it is there. If you go to Symfony, so var dumper is there, right? But normally there are configurations settings in such frameworks like Laravel, Symfony and Drupal. Everywhere you will see configs, and configuration is for your you can say settings. Okay, so for example, if we need certain configuration files, we will create a new folder and call it config. So all the code related to configuration should go here. Okay, you might have understood if you go to index.php, there is a lot of extra code here. Why? Because you can see the router is new router. So all of these routes, maybe there are now 100 routes for you for certain reasons. All of them are being added to the front page, which is not a good way. It should go to configurations. Okay, normally routes are placed inside the configurations.
Yes, sir.
So we can copy all this code of routes, or maybe cut is the right word, and we will move it to inside the config. We will create a file. It should be any, because we will be including it. It is not going to be a class, so it should be just routes.php, simple PHP file. And here we will paste all the code related to the routes, and this route should be included. Use framework router. Okay, now we should include this file, and where should it be included? In the index.php. So require, and where it is, config slash routes.php. Okay, the router, this is the router, we have included it. We should include it now here. And if I go to the home page or whichever page, it now has been included in the file. So the configs have gone to routes.php here, right? One thing you need to know, if now I have to add a new route, so where should I come to? Config
Yes,
and
sir.
this place, that's it. Similarly, there can be, we have right now in index.php, if you can see in the container, we have used container set for just one class, which is database. Okay,
Yes, sir.
so there can be hundreds of such classes, and they are normally called services. In such frameworks, they are called services, or even this container is called services container in PHP frameworks. Okay, so over time we will have more than one class which we will have to use. So again, this will be very difficult, creating all the instances here in the index.php and then moving them to using them. So what we should do, in the config we should create another file, and we will call it services.php. This is normally the word given to such files. Okay, so in the services.php, what should we do is, we will cut this container is equal to new container, and then all of the container related code
Yes, sir.
there. So in the services.php, if we use this, container is equal to new container, and for container we will use framework container, right? That's it. It even needs database, so we already have database there, but use app database like this. Okay, so here container is equal to new container. We initialize the container and then the new, and the set method also should be here.
Yes, sir.
Where is it? Have we deleted it, or
Yes, sir. We have cut it and pasted inside as well.
okay, this is
Yes.
right. Okay, so container set db class db, that's it. So it is basically using that now the next step is to include container also in the index.php, because we are using it here,
Yes, sir.
right? So at the top of the page here, require config slash services.php. So it's still working now. Is it okay? One thing you can do from the included files also is, if for example this is the container, and you can return containers also, some object. So return container, then you can catch that there, just like if you have used React.js or JavaScript export and import.
Yes, sir.
So you can do this as well. So in that case, for example, container in index.php, if you include it here, require this, so it will be container equals require this. So this becomes available as a variable, and then you can use that. Let me check if it is working fine. It's still working fine, right? Okay, there is one problem, and I will demonstrate it with the help of an example. So now our framework is more or less working the routes actually. So let me quickly create a controller, and we will call it what should it be, which doesn't use any database. The example should be,
Yes, sir.
so maybe we create a no database .php. This is just a controller, okay? No database.php. What should be its path? No database.php, and then class no database, and it should have a action also. So public function show. Okay, so show should for now just print. We are not including the view for now, okay, just for demo purpose. This controller doesn't use database, like we are not using any database connectivity for this. We just need to display this message once this database is this controller is accessed, right? So what should be the path for this one, as we have set it up now? No
database.
What should be the path? So where it has these capitals words.
Yes, sir. No dash database.
Good, Shavas. So it should be,
No.
let me zoom in the URL for you. So it should be no dash database, and the method is show. What does the uncaught reflection exception? Class app control. Let me zoom it out. Class no database does not exist. No database.
So use the namespace.
Oh, good point. So it should be use
Namespace.
Yes. Namespace. App slash controllers. So this controller does not use database, right? Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay. In the database class, if you go to the database class, this is the database class. In this constructor, I'm just going to print the database class has been initialized, and we can concatenate it with a VR. Okay, this is just a message. Once the database class is initialized, this message will display. And where is it initialized? It is initialized in the services.php right now. this new DB, and then it is set DB and then return container, whatever. So if I refresh the page, it is not using the database class,
Yes, sir.
but the database class has been initialized. Why?
So we have initialized inside the index page.
Yeah, we are including it,
Yes,
and
sir.
it is automatically. So if we are the code which we have so far written, if we have say 100 classes like this which are not needed, they still will be initialized for us.
Yes, sir. Exactly.
So there is some minor problem with the code we have so far written. How should ideally be the this system?
Yes, sir.
If we don't need a class, it
Yes,
should
sir.
not be initialized.
Exactly, sir.
It should only be initialized on demand.
On demand.
If it is needed, it should be initialized,
We
right?
need the database class, so it will initialize the database class.
Exactly. So where is the database class used? It is used in the model.
Yes, sir.
Any model, you now know the model concept. So
Exactly.
here database class is used, so it's okay to initialize it. But if
Yes,
a
sir.
class doesn't need
Any
database, so we should, and this is example for any such classes. If they are not needed, they should not be initialized. So we have to change the code we have written so far. If I go to services, here we are initializing the database class and then the setting the value and passing the object here. Okay, passing the object here, but we won't pass the object here. We'll pass an anonymous function here, function, and you already have the knowledge of anonymous functions from JavaScript.
Yes, sir. Calvin.
So here we will pass the anonymous function, and the anonymous function will return, what should it in return? It should return the object of the database. It should return the object of the database, but just a function, not, this is not initialization of the class. It is returning the function, and when that function is called, then the database will be
Yes, sir.
returned. And here we have to change, because now the DB is not available to us,
Yes, sir.
so we'll change it to, you can have any value here, but it should be the string name of the class, so it's framework slash database.
Ape database.
Yes, app database, thank you. So this is going to be the key, and the value should be what? A function.
Yes, sir.
It's not an object now, it's a change we have made, right?
Yes,
So what next we need to do, because this is just the calling of the function, we need to use change some code in the container also. So where is container? It's in the framework container. Here you can see we are setting the value, class and value. So class can be whatever class it is we have now passed,
Yes, sir.
but the value should now be,
Yes, sir. A
you can
function.
call it callable, of type callable. Callable is any function or whatever. Now the value is this value should be a function actually,
Yes, sir.
and it will be saved inside the
Inside
class.
array, yes, sir.
Okay, so once we get the function, previously if array underscore key exists class this dot bindings, so we were just returning the binding class.
Yes, sir.
But right now if we do the same, what should it return? It should return the anonymous function.
Yes, sir.
It
Exactly.
should not return the object. That's the key, what we should do, so that still the object is returned. This line we need to change. This is your test for your anonymous functions. What should we do? We should use two brackets like this, so that this is called.
Yes, sir.
This function now, this is up to here, this is anonymous function, but these two brackets will call that
Call
function.
That function, yes, sir.
So once that function is called, what it will do? It will
return an
basically,
object.
exactly, this in the service.php we have done. Once the anonymous function is called, it will return the
Object of
Object.
database class.
so this is now on demand.
Yes, sir.
This object returning is now on demand. If a class is needed,
Yes, sir.
it will check it here in the container. If the key exists, so it will run that function.
Yes.
So if the function is run, it will return it.
Yes, sir.
Otherwise it won't be returned. So if we refresh the page, hopefully that
Yes, sir.
it means now it is not using the
The database class.
database class. Got it?
Yes, sir.
So if there is any questions, you can ask. I will rechange the database class for now to remove that dump we have done. Print this. So at least now we have a system. If a class exists, it will actually if a class has its constructors, has some objects as its parameters, so this code will run. You can go through this code or again and again, this code. And if a class has no has arguments as its constructor, but they are primitive data types,
Yes,
so
sir.
this code will run,
This one,
and it will run only on demand once the class is used. If some constructors like for controllers like the one we know database,
yes, sir.
here it doesn't need
Any
database,
else
so
instruction.
we have even improved that code as well.
Yes, sir.
So in the next lecture we will have some lots of more functionality to add to this framework. See you till then.
Okay, thank you, sir.